You ever feel like you're screaming into a void and no one's listening? Like you're pouring your heart out, giving everything you've got, and the person who's supposed to care the most just doesn't. I know that feeling. It's heavy, isn't it? It sits in your chest like a stone, cold and unyielding. And no matter how hard you try to push it away, it just grows. That's where I was. That's where this story begins. My name's Lena, and I'm about to take you through something that tore me apart and forced me to rebuild myself from the ashes. It's not pretty. It's not clean. And it's definitely not what I thought my life would be when I said I do. But it's real. And it's raw. And maybe, just maybe, it'll make you feel something too. I was 32 when I started noticing the cracks. Not the big, obvious ones you see in movies, where someone's shouting or slamming doors. No. These were quieter, sneakier, the kind that creep into your life so slowly you don't even realize they're there until you're standing in the middle of a mess you didn't make. My husband, Tom, was my world. We'd been married for 7 years, together for 10. High school sweethearts, you know. The kind of story people smile at when you tell it. Were kids who fell in love over late-night diner runs and mixtapes, who dreamed of a house with a porch swing and maybe a dog or two. We weren't perfect, but we were good. Also, I thought. Tom worked construction, long hours under the sun, coming home with dirt under his nails and a tired smile that used to make my heart skip. I worked as a nurse, night shifts mostly, because the pay was better and we were saving for that house, that swing, that life we kept promising each other. We were a team. At least, that's what I told myself when I'd come home at 3 a.m., my scrubs smelling like antiseptic, and find him passed out on the couch with the TV blaring some late-night infomercial. I'd cover him with a blanket, kiss his forehead, and tell myself he was just tired. Work was hard, life was hard, but we had each other. Then the late night started. Not Menahis. At first, it was small things. He'd say he was grabbing a beer with the guys after work. No big deal. I didn't mind. Tom deserved to unwind. Right, he'd come home a little tipsy, smelling like cheap whiskey and cigarettes, and I'd laugh it off, tease him about acting like he was 21 again. But one night a week turned into 2, then 3. He'd stumble in at midnight, sometimes later, and I'd be there, waiting, my shift long over, the house too quiet. I'd ask how his night was, and he'd mumble something vague, his eyes not quite meeting mine. Just the usual, he'd say, and then he'd head to bed, leaving me standing in the kitchen with a sinking feeling I couldn't name. I tried to ignore it. God, I tried. I told myself I was being paranoid, that marriage isn't all roses and candlelight. People drift a little, don't they? They have their own lives, their own friends. Tom's buddies from high school, the ones he'd known forever, were still around. They'd meet up at this dive bar downtown, a place called Rusty's with sticky floors and neon signs that flickered like they were on their last legs. I'd been there once or twice. Early on, when Tom would invite me along, I'd sit at a wobbly table, nursing a soda, while they laughed aloud and told stories I'd heard 100 times. I didn't fit in, not really. They were his people, not mine. So, when he started going without me, I didn't think much of it. I had my own life, my own battles. Work was brutal 12-hour shifts, patients who broke your heart, doctors who didn't listen. I didn't have the energy to chase him down. There's a difference between giving someone space and watching them disappear. I started noticing things, little things. At first, his phone would buzz late at night, and he'd silence it without looking, like he already knew who it was. He'd come home with lipstick on his collar, one sennit bright red. Nothing obvious, just a faint smudge of pink that could have been anything. I asked him about it, casual as I could manage, and he laughed, said it was probably from brushing against some woman at the bar. You know how crowded Rusty's gets, he said, and I nodded like it made sense. even though my stomach twisted. Then there were the receipts crumpled in his jeans, tossed in the trash like he didn't think I'd find them. Drinks, food, tabs that didn't add up for just a couple beers with the guys. I'd hold those receipts in my hands, sitting at the kitchen table while the clock ticked past midnight, and I'd wonder what I was missing. I wasn't stupid. I knew something was wrong. But love makes you blind, doesn't it? Or maybe it's not blindness, maybe it's just hope, stubborn and desperate, clinging to the idea that the person you chose wouldn't hurt you. I kept telling myself it was nothing. Tom wasn't cheating. He wasn't that guy. He was just stressed, distant, caught up in memories of when life was simpler, and he and his friends were young and free, before mortgages and overtime and a wife who was always tired. I'd lie awake at night, listening to him snore beside me, and I'd try to remember the last time he looked at me like he used to, like I was the only thing that mattered. I couldn't pinpoint it, and that scared me more than anything. The house started to feel different. It was ours, technically bought 3 years ago. A fixer-upper we swore we'd make our own, but it was still half-finished. Like us, the kitchen cabinets were missing handles, the bathroom sink leaked, and the porch swing we dreamed of was just a sketch in my notebook. I'd come home from a shift, my feet aching, my head pounding, and I'd see dishes in the sink, laundry piling up, things Tom promised he'd handle but didn't. I wasn't asking for much, just a partner, someone to meet me halfway, but he was never there, physically. Sure, sometimes, but his mind, his heart, those were at Rusty's, lost in a haze of bourbon and nostalgia. I started keeping track, not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't stop myself. I'd mark the nights he went out, the times he came home, the excuses he gave. Monday, he'd say he was working late. Wednesday, it was poker with the guys. Friday, always Friday, it was Rusty's. I'd wait up, not because I wanted to confront him, but because I needed to see his face, to look for something, well, maybe, or regret. But there was nothing, just that same tired smile, the one that didn't reach his eyes anymore. "You're still up," he'd say, like it was a surprise, like I hadn't been sitting there for hours, my heart racing with questions I was too afraid to ask. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. It was a Thursday, not even one of his usual nights, but he texted me around 6 p.m. grabbing a drink with Mike, be home soon. Mike was his best friend from high school, the loud one with the laugh that carried across a room. I didn't think anything of it at first. I was at the hospital, in the middle of a double shift, trying to comfort a patient who'd just lost her mom. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I saw his message, short and careless, like it was an afterthought. I texted back, "Okay, love you," and got nothing in return. That wasn't new. Tom wasn't big on texting, never had been, but something about it hit me wrong that night. Maybe it was the way my patient had looked at me, her eyes red and raw, talking about how she wished she'd had more time with her mom. Life's short, you know, too short to let things slide. I got off at 2 a.m., my body screaming for sleep, but my mind wouldn't shut up. I drove home, the streets empty, the radio playing some sad country song about losing someone you love. Our house was dark when I pulled up. No lights, no sign of Tom. I sat in the car for a minute, gripping the steering wheel, telling myself to calm down. He was probably asleep. He'd probably been home for hours. But I knew better. I went inside, dropped my bag by the door, and checked the bedroom. Empty. The bed was still made, the pillows untouched. My heart started pounding. Not fast, but hard, like it was trying to break free. I called him, straight to voicemail. I texted, "Where are you?" No reply. I paced the living room, my sneakers squeaking on the hardwood, my scrubs still clinging to me like a second skin. I don't know why, but I went to the trash can, the one in the kitchen where he always tossed his receipts. I dug through it, coffee grounds, take-out containers, a banana peel that left my fingers slimy, and there it was, crumpled and stained. A receipt from Rusty's, dated last Friday. Not just for drinks, food, too. Wings, nachos, a burger. Enough for a group, or maybe just two people. Sharing a meal, laughing, leaning close. I stood there, staring at it, my hands shaking, and I felt something crack inside me. I didn't cry. Not then. I was too angry, too confused. I sat on the couch, the receipt still in my hand. And I waited. The clock on the wall ticked louder than it ever had, each second stretching into forever. I thought about all the nights I'd spent alone. All the times I'd cleaned up after him, cooked for him, loved him, while he was out there, living a life I wasn't part of. I thought about the woman I used to be, bright, ambitious, the girl who laughed too loud and dreamed too big. Where was she? Buried under dishes and double shifts. That's where. And Tom, he was out there, free, while I drowned. He came home at 3:47 a.m. I know because I was staring at the clock when I heard his key in the lock. He didn't see me at first. He stumbled in, his boots loud against the floor, muttering something to himself. He smelled like whiskey and sweat, his hair messy, his shirt untucked. When he flicked on the light and saw me sitting there, he froze. "Jesus, Lena," he said, his voice thick. "You scared me. Why are you up?" I didn't answer right away. I just looked at him. Really looked at him. Like I was seeing him for the first time. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw slack. He wasn't the boy I'd fallen in love with. He was a stranger, standing in my living room, wearing my husband's clothes. "Where were you?" I asked, my voice low, steady, even though I felt like I was falling apart. "With Mike," he said, too quick, like he'd rehearsed it. "I told you, just a couple drinks, until almost 4 a.m. I held up the receipt, not even sure why. It wasn't from tonight. But it was proof, wasn't it? Proof that something was wrong, that I wasn't crazy. "What's this, Tom?" He squinted at it, then shrugged, like it was nothing. "From last week, probably." "Why are you digging through the trash, Lena?" "That's weird." Weird. He called me weird, like I was the one sneaking out, lying, leaving my wife to wonder where I was. I wanted to scream, to throw the receipt in his face, to demand answers, but I didn't. I just sat there, my hands clenched, my heart racing, and I realized something. He didn't care. Not enough to explain. Not enough to fight for us. He looked at me like I was a problem, not a person, and that hurt worse than anything. He went to bed after that. Didn't even wait for me to say anything else. I stayed on the couch, the receipt still in my hand, and I stared at the ceiling until the sun came up. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. My mind was spinning, replaying every moment, every excuse, every time I'd let it slide. I thought about my patient, the one who'd lost her mom, and how she talked about regret, about wishing she'd spoken up sooner. I didn't want to live like that. I didn't want to wake up 10 years from now, still waiting for Tom to choose me. That morning, I made a decision. Not a big one, not yet, just a small one. But it felt like the first step out of a cage. I wasn't going to sit there anymore, cleaning up his messes, swallowing my questions. I wasn't going to be the wife who smiled and nodded while her husband lived a separate life. I didn't know what I was going to do. Not exactly. But I knew I had to do something. I had to find out what was really going on, why Tom was slipping away, and what he was hiding at Rusty's. I had to take back some piece of myself, even if it hurt, even if it broke us. So I started watching him, not in a crazy way, not like I was stalking him or anything, but I paid attention. I noticed when he left, what he wore, how he acted. I checked his phone when he was in the shower, not proud of it, but I did. There were texts from Mike, from other guys, all vague, all about meeting up. Nothing concrete, no smoking gun, No proof of anything worse than what I already knew. But it wasn't enough. I needed more. I needed to see it for myself. To know what was pulling him away from me. One Friday, I called in sick. I never do that. Nursing's not the kind of job you just skip, but I couldn't take another night of wondering. Tom left around 7 p.m. Same as always. Said he'd be back by 11. I waited 20 minutes. Then I got in my car and drove to Rusty's. My hands were shaking the whole way. My heart pounding so loud I could hear it over the radio. I didn't know what I was looking for. Didn't know what I'd do if I found it. But I had to go. I had to know. Rusty's was packed when I got there. The parking lot full of beat-up trucks and motorcycles. The neon sign buzzed, casting a red glow over everything. I sat in my car for a minute, gripping the steering wheel, telling myself to breathe. I wasn't dressed for a bar. Jeans, a hoodie, my hair in a messy bun from a long day. I didn't care. I wasn't there to be seen. I just needed answers. I walked inside, the smell of beer and fried food hitting me like a wave. The place was loud, crowded, people shouting over the jukebox, glasses clinking. I scanned the room, my eyes darting from face to face. And then I saw him, Tom, sitting at a table in the corner, laughing, a drink in his hand. Mike was there, and a couple other guys I recognized from high school. But it wasn't just them. There was someone else. Someone who made my stomach drop. She was leaning close to him, her hand on his arm, her laugh loud enough to cut through the noise. She wasn't a stranger. Not entirely. I'd seen her before, years ago, at one of Tom's reunions. Jess, her name was. Jess with the bright smile and the easy charm. The kind of woman who made everyone feel like they mattered. I hadn't thought about her in forever. Hadn't had a reason to. But there she was, sitting next to my husband, looking at him like he was hers. I didn't move. I couldn't. I just stood there, half hidden by the crowd, watching them. Tom wasn't touching her. Not really. But he wasn't pulling away either. He was smiling. The kind of smile I hadn't seen in months. The kind that used to be mine. They were talking, their heads close, like the rest of the world didn't exist. I felt like I was underwater. Everything slow and muffled. My chest tight. I don't know how long I stood there, maybe a minute, maybe 10. But then Jess laughed again, and Tom leaned in, and something inside me snapped. I didn't confront them. I wanted to, God. I wanted to storm over there and scream, to demand answers, to make him see me. But I didn't. I turned around and walked out, my legs shaking, my breath coming in short gasps. I got in my car and drove home, tears blurring the road, my hands clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. I didn't cry when I got home, though. I was past that. I was angry not just at Tom, but at myself, for trusting him, for waiting, for letting him make me feel small. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, a glass of wine in front of me, and touched. I thought about everything: a wedding, our promises, the life we'd planned. I thought about Jess, about Rusty's, about the receipts and the lies and the nights I'd spent alone. And I realized something. I wasn't just losing Tom. I was losing myself. I was disappearing piece by piece, while he lived his life like I didn't matter. But I wasn't going to disappear. Not anymore. I didn't know how. Didn't know when. But I was going to make him see me. I was going to make him feel what I'd been feeling: alone, ignored, invisible. I was going to show him the price of his indifference. And it was going to hurt. All right. Let's dive into part 2, picking up right where we left off. This continues the story of Lena, a woman aged 25 to 40, unraveling the pain of her husband Tom's secret night out drinking with old friends and the emotional toll of his indifference. The tone remains dramatic, melancholic, sensational, and thrilling, crafted to captivate viewers aged 18 to 50. This part is approximately 6,000 words, flowing seamlessly from part 1 and setting the stage for part 3. Ensuring the full 18,000-word narrative feels like one cohesive, immersive conversation. No previews, summaries, bullet points, or subheading, just a raw, engaging story that pulls you in and doesn't let go. The kitchen table was my battlefield that night. The wine glass sat there, untouched, mocking me with its stillness while my mind churned like a storm. I kept seeing Tom's face, the way he laughed with Jess, the way his eyes lit up in a way they hadn't for me in so long. It wasn't just betrayal, it was theft. He'd stolen pieces of me, pieces I'd given willingly because I loved him, and now he was tossing them aside like they meant nothing. I wanted to hate him, to let anger burn away the hurt. But love's not that simple, is it? It clings, even when it's breaking you. I sat there until the sky turned grey, the first light creeping through the blinds, and I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to keep fading into the background of his life. Tom came downstairs around 8 a.m., his hair a mess, his eyes heavy with the kind of haze you get from too much whiskey and not enough sleep. He didn't say anything at first, just shuffled to the coffee maker like it was any other morning. I watched him, my hands folded in my lap, the receipt from Rusty's still crumpled on the table where I'd left it. He didn't notice it, or maybe he pretended not to. "You're up early," he said finally, his voice rough, like he was testing the waters. "Didn't sleep," I said, and my voice was calmer than I felt. Inside, I was screaming, but I kept it locked down. I wanted to see what he'd do, how he'd play this. He glanced at me, just a flicker, then turned back to the coffee maker, pouring himself a mug like my words were nothing. "Rough shift?" he asked, and I almost laughed. Rough shift? Like that was why I was sitting here, staring at him like he was a puzzle I couldn't solve. "Something like that," I said. I picked up the receipt, smoothed it out with my fingers. "Found this last night, from Friday. You didn't mention eating at Rusty's." He froze, just for a second, but I saw it. His shoulders tensed, his hand pausing mid-sip. Then he shrugged, that same careless shrug that was starting to feel like a slap. "Yeah, we got hungry, grabbed some food." "What's the big deal?" "The big deal." I wanted to scream it at him. Big deal was him slipping away. The big deal was me waiting up while he laughed with someone else. The big deal was our life crumbling while he acted like it was fine. But I didn't. I just nodded, slow, like I was thinking it over. "No big deal," I said, and I stood up, leaving the receipt on the table. I walked past him, my heart pounding, and I felt his eyes on me. But he didn't say anything else. He didn't have to. The silence said enough. I went to work that day, even though I felt like I was moving through quicksand. The hospital was chaos, patients shouting, monitors beeping, a kid crying in the waiting room because his mom was in surgery. I went through the motions, checking charts, taking vitals, forcing smiles for people who were hurting worse than me. But every quiet moment, every second I wasn't busy, my mind went back to Rusty's, to Jess, to Tom's laugh, the one I used to live for, now aimed at someone else. I kept picturing her hand on his arm, her smile, the way she leaned in like she belonged there. Was she the reason he was out every week? Was she what he was running to, leaving me behind? I didn't want to believe it. Tom wasn't perfect, but cheating, that wasn't him. Or maybe I just didn't want it to be him, because admitting it meant admitting I'd been wrong about us, about everything. I'd built my life around him, all plans, our house, our future. If he was throwing that away, what did I have left? I pushed the thought down, buried it under bandages and paperwork, but it kept clawing its way back up. That night, I came home to an empty house again. Tom had texted Mina the grabbing a drink with the guy's message, short and cold, like he was checking a box. I stood in the living room, my back still slung over my shoulder, and I looked around. The walls were bare, the furniture mismatched, the dreams we'd had for this place gathering dust. I'd been carrying it all: work, bills, the house, US, while he was out there, free. I dropped my bag and sank onto the couch, my hands shaking. I wasn't sad anymore. I was furious, not just at him, but at myself for letting it go this far. I don't know when I decided to go back to Rusty's. It wasn't a plan. Not really. It was more like a pull, like something inside me needed to see it again, to make it real. I changed out of my scrubs, pulled on a black sweater and jeans, tied my hair back. I looked in the mirror, and for a second, I didn't recognize myself. My eyes were too sharp, my mouth too tight. I looked like someone who was done waiting. The drive to Rusty's was a blur. The streets were slick with rain, the neon light smearing across my windshield. I parked across the street this time, far enough that no one would notice me, but close enough to see the door. I sat there, the engine off, the car growing cold around me. My phone was in my hand. Tom's text still open, mocking me. He home soon, he'd said. Soon. What did that even mean anymore? I waited. 10 minutes. 20. An hour. People came and went, guys in flannel, women in tight dresses, the kind of crowd that made Rusty's what it was. I kept my eyes on the door, my heart jumping every time it swung open. And then, there he was, Tom, stepping out into the rain, his jacket pulled up against the drizzle. He wasn't alone. Jess was with him, her arm looped through his, her laugh carrying even through the storm. They stopped under the awning, and I watched, my breath catching as she tilted her head up to him, saying something I couldn't hear. He smiled, that smile again, and leaned down, close enough that their faces almost touched. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. I wanted to get out, to run across the street, to scream at them both, but I didn't. I just watched, frozen, as they stood there, oblivious to the rain, to me, to everything. They didn't kiss, didn't cross that linen knot that I saw, but they didn't have to. The way they moved, the way they looked at each other, it was enough. It was worse than enough. They stayed there for a few minutes, talking, laughing, until Mike came out, clapping Tom on the shoulder. Jess pulled away, at not far, and the three of them headed to a truck parked a few spaces down. Tom got in the driver's seat, Jess slid in beside him, and Mike took the back. I watched them pull out, their taillights fading into the rain, and I sat there, my heart pounding, my mind racing. Where were they going? Another bar? Her place? Somewhere I'd never know about. Somewhere I wasn't welcome. I didn't follow them. Maybe I should have, but I couldn't move. I just sat in my car, the rain drumming on the roof, and I let it hit me. All of it. The hurt, the anger, the betrayal. I'd spent years building a life with Tom, giving him everything, and this was what I got. Nights alone, lies, a husband who didn't even see me anymore. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who believed in love, in forever, and I wondered where she'd gone. I wanted her back. I needed her back. I drove home, my hands still shaking, my eyes burning with tears I refused to let fall. The house was dark when I got there, the kind of dark that feels alive, like it's watching you. I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat on the couch, my phone in my lap, and I thought about what to do next. I could confront him, demand the truth, but what would that get me? More lies, an apology he didn't mean. I could leave, pack a bag and walk away. But where would I go? This was my home, my life. As broken as it was, I wasn't ready to give it up. Not yet. So I did something else. I started planning. Not a big, dramatic plan. Not like in the movies where someone burns everything down. Just a quiet one. A way to take back some control. I wasn't going to keep chasing him, begging for answers he'd never give. I was going to find out the truth myself, piece by piece, and then I'd decide what to do with it. I didn't know how. Not exactly. But I knew where to start. The next morning, Tom acted like nothing had happened. He was up before me, making breakfast pancakes, of all things, like he was trying to play the good husband. I sat at the table, watching him flip them in the pan, his back to me, and I felt like I was in a stranger's house. "You're quiet," he said, glancing over his shoulder. Everything okay? I almost laughed. Okay. Nothing was okay, but I just nodded, took a sip of coffee, and said, just tired. He didn't push it. He never did. That was the thing about Tom, didn't want to see the cracks. Didn't want to deal with the mess. He'd rather pretend everything was fine, even when it was falling apart. I went to work that day, but I wasn't really there. My body was checking vitals, changing ives, but my mind was somewhere else. I kept thinking about Jess, about what she meant to Tom, about what I'd seen. I needed to know more, not just for him, but for me. I needed to understand why my life was unraveling, what I'd done to deserve this. So, when my shift ended, I didn't go home. I went to a coffee shop downtown, one of those places with too many plants and overpriced lattes. And I opened my laptop. I started with social media. It wasn't hard to find her. Jess Harper. Same bright smile. Same easy charm. Her profile was public, full of photosha at Rusty's, her with friends, her at some music festival with a drink in her hand. I scrolled through, my stomach twisting, looking for Tom. He wasn't tagged, wasn't obvious. But I saw things. A group shot from a few weeks ago. Him in the background laughing. A post about good times with old friends. Dated the same night he'd come home at 3 a.m. Nothing concrete. Nothing I could point to and say, this is it. But it was enough to keep me digging. I found Mike's profile too, and his was sloppier, less curated. He posted everything but tabs, bad selfies, rants about work. I went back months, my eyes burning from the screen, and I saw it. A photo from Rusty's. Tom and Jess at a table, their heads close. Mike's caption saying, living the dream. It was from last summer, before I'd even noticed Tom pulling away. I stared at it, my heart sinking. This wasn't new. Whatever it was, it had been going on for a while. I didn't stop there. I couldn't. I started checking other Thingston's bank account, the one we shared, but I never looked at because I trusted him. There were charges I didn't recognize. Small but consistent. Cash withdrawals, bar tabs, a diner at 2 a.m. I cross-referenced dates with the nights he'd been out, and it lined up too well. He wasn't just grabbing a beer with the guys. He was living a whole other life, one I wasn't part of. I sat in that coffee shop until they started stacking chairs, my laptop warm against my thighs, my coffee cold. I felt like a detective, piecing together a crime. But the crime was my marriage. Every click, every photo, every receipt, it was another cut. Another reminder that I'd been blind. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was determined. I wasn't going to confront him. Not yet. I needed more. I needed to know everything. Over the next few weeks, I got good at it. Watching, waiting, collecting. I'd check his phone when he was asleep. Not touching anything, just looking. Texts from Jess. Nothing obvious, but too frequent, too familiar. See you tonight, one said, with a winking emoji that made my skin crawl. I drive by Rusty's sometimes, not going in, just watching from my car, seeing who came and went. I'd listen when Tom talked, picking up on the least late shift that didn't match his schedule. The guy's night when Mike was posting about being home with his kid. It wasn't healthy. I know that. I wasn't sleeping, wasn't eating right. My friends at work noticed, asked if I was okay, but I brushed them off. I couldn't explain it. Not without sounding crazy. How do you tell someone your husband's slipping away, and you're chasing shadows to prove it? That I couldn't stop. It was like an addiction. This need to know, to understand. I told myself it was about him, about us. But deep down, it was about me. I needed to feel like I had some control, like I wasn't just a victim in my own story. One night, I followed him again, not to Rusty's this time, somewhere new. A bar across town I'd never heard of. He'd mentioned it offhand, said it was a change of pace. But I saw the way his eyes darted when he said it. like he was hiding something. I waited until he left, then drove there, my heart in my throat. The place was quieter than Rusty's, more upscale, with fairy lights and a patio out back. I didn't go in. I parked across the street, my car hidden in the shadows, and I watched. He was there, at a table outside, just beside him. No mic this time, no group, just the two of them. They were drinking wine, not beer, and that hit me hard for some reason. Wine was what we used to drink, Tom and me, on date nights we couldn't afford but did anyway. Now he was sharing it with her, their glasses clinking, their smiles to close. I watched them talk, her hand brushing his love soft and private. I felt like I was intruding, like I was the one who didn't belong, and that made me hate myself even more. I stayed until they left, until they walked to his truck, her arm around his waist, his hand on her shoulder. They didn't kiss, didn't do anything I could point to and say, at cheating. But they didn't have to. I knew what I saw, what I felt. I drove home, my hands steady now, my tears gone. I wasn't breaking anymore. I was building something, a resolve, a plan I didn't even fully understand yet. When Tom got home that night, I was in bed, pretending to sleep. He slid in beside me, his breath sour with wine, and I lay there, my eyes open in the dark, listening to him breathe. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who trusted him, who believed in him. She was still in there, somewhere, but she was quiet now, overshadowed by someone new of my own who wasn't going to let this go, who wasn't going to let him win. I started keeping a journal, not digital, something he'd never find. I wrote everything, dates, times, what I saw, what I felt. It wasn't just evidence. It was a way to keep myself sane, to make sense of the chaos. I'd write at night, after he was asleep, my pen scratching in the dark, words spilling out like blood. I wrote about the hurt, the anger, the fear that I was losing everything. But I also wrote about what I wanted, not just to catch him, not just to prove I was right, but to take back my life, to stop feeling like a ghost in my own home. I didn't know where it was going, not yet, but I knew I was done waiting for him to change, done hoping he'd see me. I was going to make him see me, one way or another. I was going to show him what it felt like to be ignored, to be left behind. And when I did, he'd understand exactly what he'd lost. The journal became my lifeline, the one thing keeping me tethered when everything else was slipping away. I'd sit in the dark, long after Tom's snores filled the house, and pour everything onto those Pajesti nights he didn't come home. The way Jess's name burned in my mind. The receipts and texts and moments that weren't mine anymore. It wasn't just about catching him, though that's what I told myself at first. It was about holding on to me, about proving I was still here, still fighting, even if no one else could see it. The house felt like a graveyard, full of ghosts of who we used to be. But those pages, they were alive, pulsing with everything I couldn't say out loud. Tom didn't notice the change in me. Not really. He'd come home from his nights out, whiskey on his breath, and I'd play the part quiet, tired, a wife who didn't ask too many questions. But I wasn't that wife anymore. I was watching, always watching, piecing together the puzzle of his lies. I'd stopped confronting him about the receipts or the late nights. What was the point? He'd just shrug, mumble something vague, and I'd be left feeling smaller than before. No, I needed more than his excuses. I needed the truth, raw and undeniable, and I was going to get it, even if it broke me. It was early December when things shifted. The air was sharp, the kind of cold that bites at your skin, and Christmas lights were starting to flicker on houses down the street. Our place was bare. No decorations, no tree. We used to love Christmas. Tom would haul in a lopsided pine. I'd bake cookies that always burned, and we'd laugh, tangled in tinsel, planning a future that felt so close. This year, I couldn't even bring myself to buy a wreath. The thought of pretending everything was fine, of hanging ornaments while he slipped out to Rusty's, or wherever else, made my stomach turn. He was out again that night. A Tuesday. Which wasn't his usual work thing, he'd said, barely looking at me as he grabbed his keys. I didn't believe him. Hadn't believed him in months. But I nodded, stirred my coffee, and let him go. The second the door closed, I grabbed my journal, flipped to a new page, and wrote down the time. 6:42 p.m. I didn't know why it mattered, but it did. Every detail was a brick, building something I couldn't yet see. I waited an hour, then got in my car. I wasn't sure where I was going, not at first. Rusty's was the obvious choice, but something told me he wasn't there. He'd been cagey lately, his lies sloppier, like he was getting careless or maybe just tired of hiding. I drove past the bar anyway, slowing down to scan the parking lot. His truck wasn't there. I kept going, my hands tight on the wheel, my heart thudding in a way that wasn't fear anymore, it was purpose. I ended up at that other bar, the one across town with the fairy lights and the patio, the place I'd seen him with Jess before. It was a hunch, nothing more, but it felt right. The lot was half full, the air thick with the smell of rain that hadn't fallen yet. I parked in the shadows, same as last time, and I waited. My phone sat in the queue folder, silent, mocking me with its lack of answers. I didn't call him, didn't text. I just watched the door, the windows, the glow of the light spilling onto the pavement. And then I saw her, Jess, stepping out onto the patio, a glass of wine in her hand, her hair catching the light like she was in some damn movie. She was alone at first, leaning against the railing, smiling at nothing. My chest tightened, but I didn't move. I just watched, my breath fogging the window, my fingers itching to write it all down. A minute later, the door opened again, and there he was, his jacket slung over his shoulder, his laugh low and easy. He walked over to her, casual, like it was the most natural thing in the world, and they started talking, their heads close, their voices lost in the hum of the night. I don't know how long I sat there, watching them. It wasn't like before, when I'd felt like I was drowning. This time, I was steady, focused, taking it all in. I noticed everything, the way she touched his arm, the way he didn't pull away, the way they moved like they'd done this 100 times. They weren't drunk, not sloppy like at Rusty's. This was different, quieter, more intimate. They sat at a table, shared a plate of something, laughed over stories I'd never hear. I wanted to feel rage, to let it consume me. But instead, I felt cold, like I was outside my body, watching someone else's life fall apart. I took out my phone, not to call, but to record. I zoomed in as much as I could. The image grainy but clear in autumn, Jess, their smiles, their closeness. I didn't know what I'd do with it. Not yet. But it felt like power, like I was taking something back. I filmed for a few minutes, then stopped, my hands shaking not from anger, but from clarity. This was real. This was happening, and I wasn't going to let it slide anymore. They left around 10 p.m., walking to his truck, her arm brushing his. I didn't follow them this time. I didn't need to. I had what I came for, maybe more. I drove home, the video burning a hole in my pocket, my mind racing with what came next. The house was dark when I got there, the silence heavier than ever. I sat at the kitchen table, my journal open, and I wrote it all down, every detail, every moment, every stab of pain and resolve. I didn't cry. I hadn't cried in weeks. I was past that now, moving toward something else, something sharper. Tom came home at 1 a.m., quieter than usual, like he was trying not to wake me. I was in bed, the lights off, but my eyes were open, staring at the ceiling. He slid in beside me, his breath steady, and I wondered if he ever thought about me when he was with her. If he ever felt guilty. I didn't ask, I just lay there. My heart a drumbeat. My plan taking shape in the dark. The next few days, I was a ghost in my own life. I went to work, smiled at patients, nodded at Tom's small talk, but I was somewhere else, building something in my mind. I didn't confront him, didn't show him the video. I wasn't ready. I needed more and not evidence, but strength. I needed to know I could do this, whatever this was. I kept watching him, though, closer now, picking up on things I'd missed before. The way he'd check his phone when he thought I wasn't looking. The way he'd leave the room to take certain calls. The way he'd mention Jess in passing, casual, like she was just a friend. Nothing more. I started talking to people. 2 not friends. Not yet, but co-workers. People who'd listen without judging. There was Sarah, a nurse I worked with, older, tougher, who'd been through 2 divorces and wore her scars like armor. I didn't tell her everything. Just in Autumn's late nights, my suspicions, the weight I couldn't shake. She didn't sugarcoat it. Men like that don't change unless you make them, she said one night over coffee in the break room, her eyes sharp. You've got to hit him where it hurts, Lena. Not with yelling or crying, those don't stick. With something he can't ignore. Her words stayed with me, rattling around in my head. I didn't want to hurt Tom, not really. I wanted him to see me, to feel what I'd felt, to understand what he'd done. But how do you make someone care when they've already checked out? I didn't know, but I was going to find out. I kept digging too, not just online, but in our life. I went through his things, not proud of it, but I did. His work bag, his truck, the pockets of his jackets. I found more receipts, more proof of nights I wasn't part of. A matchbook from that patio bar. A phone number scrawled on it in handwriting I didn't recognize. A photo in his glove compartment. Old, faded him and Jess from years ago. High school maybe. Their arms around each other, smiling like the world was theirs. I stared at it, my heart twisting. Had this always been there? Waiting. Had I just been too blind to see it? I didn't stop at Tom. I looked into Jess too. Not stalking, not crazy, just curious. I found out where she worked at a boutique downtown. All candles and overpriced scarves. I drove by once, not planning to go in, but I saw her through the window, laughing with a customer. Her life so bright, so easy. I hated her. Not for who she was, but for what she had. Tom's attention, his time, the parts of him I'd lost. I didn't go inside. I wasn't ready to face her. Not like that. Christmas came, and we went through the motions. Tom bought a tree, a small one, and we decorated it in silence. The radio playing carols neither of us sang along to. He gave me a necklace, silver, pretty, the kind of gift you pick out when you're trying to say something without saying it. I thanked him, wore it, but it felt like a chain, not a gift. I gave him a jacket, one he'd mentioned wanting, and he smiled, said he loved it. But I saw his eyes drift to his phone, to whatever was waiting there. That night, Christmas Eve, he went out. Just a quick drink, he said, and I didn't argue. I sat by the tree, the lights blurring in my vision, and I wrote in my journal, he doesn't see me, but he will. I didn't know what I meant. Not exactly, but it felt like a promise. To myself, to the woman I was becoming. The new year brought a kind of clarity. I wasn't just collecting evidence anymore. I was building a case. Not for a fight, but for me. I started taking care of myself. Small things at first. I ate better, slept more, went for walks when the house felt too small. I talked to Sarah more, let her pull me out of my shell. I even laughed sometimes, real laughs, the kind I've forgotten. I wasn't healed, wasn't whole, but I was stronger, steadier, ready for whatever came next. It came on a Friday, mid-January. The kind of night where the cold seeps into your bones. Tom left early. Said he was meeting Mike. But I knew better. I didn't follow him this time. I didn't need to. I had everything I needed: video, the receipts, the journal, the truth I'd been carrying like a stone. I sat at the kitchen table, my laptop open. The video paused on Tom's smile, Jess's hand on his arm. I didn't play it. I just looked at it, letting it sink in one last time. When he came home, I was ready. He walked in, 2 a.m., his steps heavy, his eyes glassy. He saw me at the table, the laptop glowing, and he stopped, his jacket half off. "Lena," he said, his voice thick. "What are you doing up?" I didn't answer right away. I just looked at him. Really looked, like I was seeing him for the first time in years. He wasn't the boy I'd loved. Not anymore. He was a man who'd made choices, who'd left me behind, who'd built a life I wasn't part of. I felt something settle inside me. Not peace, but certainty. "Sit down," I said, my voice calm, steady, stronger than I'd expected. He hesitated, his eyes flicking to the laptop, then back to me. He sat, slow, like he was walking into a trap. I turned the laptop toward him. Hit play. The video started, grainy but clear. Him, Jess, the patio, their laughter, their closeness. His face changed, color draining, his mouth opening like he wanted to speak but couldn't. I didn't say anything. Just let it play. Let it fill the silence. When it ended, I closed the laptop, leaned back, and waited. "Lena." It's not, he started, but I held up a hand, and he stopped, his words dying in his throat. "Don't," I said, "don't lie. Not now. I've seen it, Tom. I've seen all of it. Rusty's, the receipts, the texts, Jess." "I know." He stared at me, his eyes wide, like a kid caught stealing. For a second, I thought he'd deny it, spin some story. But he didn't. He just sat there, his hands clenched, his breath uneven. "It's not what you think," he said finally, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Then what is it?" I asked, and I hated how calm I sounded, like I was asking about the weather. "Tell me, Tom, tell me why you're out every week, why you're with her, why I'm here alone while you're living some other life." He didn't answer. Not really. He mumbled something about needing space, about old friends, about how things had changed between us. It wasn't an explanation, it was an excuse, flimsy and hollow. I listened, my hands folded, my heart steady, and when he trailed off, I nodded, slow, like I was agreeing with something. "I loved you," I said, and the words felt like glass, sharp and final. "I gave you everything, me time, my heart, my dreams. And you took it, Tom. You took it and gave it to someone else. Do you even see me anymore? Do you even care?" He looked at me then, really looked, and for a second I saw something wilt, maybe, or regret. But it was too late, too small. "Lena," he started. But I shook my head. "No," I said, "you don't get to talk your way out of this. You chose this. You chose her, your friends, your nights out, over me. And now you're going to feel what that's like." I stood up, walked to the counter, and picked up my journal. I didn't open it. Didn't need to. I just held it. Let him see it. Let him wonder what was inside. "I'm not invisible," I said. "Not anymore. And I'm not going to let you make me feel like I am." I didn't scream. Didn't cry. Didn't throw things. I just walked upstairs, locked the bedroom door, and left him sitting there, the laptop between us like a wall. I didn't sleep that night. But I didn't need to. I felt awake, alive, like I'd finally stepped out of the shadows. The next morning, I started moving forward. I didn't leave him. Not right away. I wasn't ready for that. And I didn't need to be. I'd shown him the price of his indifference. Not with a fight, but with the truth. Cold and unyielding. He saw me now. Saw the woman I'd become, a stronger, sharper, someone who wouldn't wait anymore. Things didn't go back to normal, because normal was a lie. He was quieter, watched me like he was waiting for the next blow. I didn't give him one. I didn't need to. I was done proving myself. I started living for me. I took up running, not to lose weight, but to feel my own strength, my own breath. I reconnected with friends, laughed again, let myself dream beyond the house, beyond Tom. I kept working, kept writing, kept building a life that wasn't defined by him. Sarah helped, pulling me into her world, her toughness rubbing off on me. I even went to therapy, not to fix us, but to fix me, to unpack the hurt and find a woman I'd buried. Tom tried, in his way. He stayed home more, cooked dinner sometimes, asked about my day. But it wasn't enough. Not anymore. I didn't hate him. Didn't love him the same either. I was just done. I didn't need his apologies, his promises. I needed myself. And I was finally finding her. One night, months later, I sat by the tree we'd never taken down, its light still glowing, faint and stubborn. I opened my journal, flipped through the pages, the story of us, of me. I didn't write anything new. I didn't need to. I'd said what I needed to say. Not just to Tom, but to myself. I'd shown him the price of his indifference. But more than that, I'd shown myself I was worth more. I don't know what comes next. Not exactly. Maybe I'll leave. Maybe I won't. Maybe Tom and I will find a way to rebuild. Or maybe we'll just drift until there's nothing left. But I know this. I'm not invisible. I'm not waiting. I'm Lena, and I'm here. And no one's going to take that away from me again.